As efforts to end the West Asia war is at a standstill, Iranian army has made a big statement.
Its spokesperson has said that Iran does not consider the war with the US and Israel to be over. During an interview aired on Iran state television, Brigadier General Mohammad Akrami said that the army has updated its target database during the ceasefire.
We don't consider the war to be over from the day the war stopped. Or in other words, there was a ceasefire or silence in the battlefield. Because there is no trust in America and our enemies. Just as we have always done during the war, we have made serious efforts to update our targets, update our target bank.
And this despite the US president claiming that his country has militarily defeated Iran. In an earlier Truth Social post, he said that Iran is in a state of collapse. Trump said that Tehran has requested the White House to open the Strait of Hormuz without clarifying how the country had communicated the message.
Now, Washington is at present considering the new proposal put forth by Iran via mediator Pakistan. US officials say that Trump is skeptical of the proposal, which according to Fars News lays down red lines, including on nuclear issues and Hormuz.
And even after weeks of fighting between the US and Israel, Hormuz, which is a narrow choke point at the center of global trade, it remains closed for maritime traffic. The US has blocked ships going to and from Iranian ports to try and squeeze Tehran of its oil revenue.
On Tuesday, US Marines boarded a commercial ship in the Arabian Sea, suspecting it was headed to Iran in violation of the US-imposed blockade.
Oil prices soared above $110 a barrel, which is their highest level since the US-Iran ceasefire, as the market felt new jitters over renewed conflict.
Qatar, a US ally that was hit by Iranian strikes despite its role as a mediator, warned of a frozen conflict if a definitive resolution is not found. This as Saudi Arabia on Tuesday welcomed leaders and officials from across the Gulf to Jeddah to discuss the crisis.
All right, and to discuss more, we're now being joined by Colonel David B. DeRoche, live from Washington, D.C. He's a professor at the Air Marshal Institute and former Deputy Director for Peacekeeping in the Office for the Secretary of Defense. Thank you so much, Colonel, for joining us on the broadcast. Of course, let's start with where things stand at the moment and where they could go from here. We understand that Washington has rejected the latest Iranian proposal. And we also understand that now Axios has listed this particular stalemate as a kind of Cold War era impasse. Now, who do you think this slow burn sort of a conflict is going to favor more going ahead?
Well, it's a good question. So in the short term, at least, the Iranians are very aware that we have midterm elections coming up, that President Trump did not make a political case to the American public for war, didn't prepare our allies, and so the war is relatively unpopular. The conventional wisdom holds that if gas prices remain high through the summer, that President Trump will lose control of one, possibly both houses of Congress. Given the political polarization, typically a president in the midterm loses control of the House of Representatives. They can impeach the president, and given the way things are going in the Democratic Party primaries, I think that people are being elected office with the promise of impeaching the president. If he loses the Senate, I don't think he'll be removed, but this is something that's on their mind. But by the same token, inflation in Iran is about, it was 70% before the war started. It's much higher now that there's a blockade on Iran. And of course, we're seeing Iranian oil exports coming to a very, very low level, if not a complete halt, with the possibility of Iran running out of storage within the next 12 days, meaning that they'd have to shut down wells, which may not be capable of being restarted. So in the long term, it favors the United States and Israel, but in the short term, it definitely favors Iran.
Colonel, as you mentioned, President Trump, there are reports that Iran itself told the U.S. that it is in a state of collapse, but publicly Tehran says war is not over yet. So is Tehran preparing for peace or preparing for round two? How do you read it?
Well, this is a problem when you deal with an authoritarian regime that's not responsive to public pressure or public influence. So the country of Iran could collapse, but the Revolutionary Guard, who controls the country, could remain firmly in response, regardless of the amount of economic suffering. I mean, we saw this during Saddam Hussein's rule in Iraq, where the country was under sanctions. It became impoverished, but Saddam still had gold-plated toilet seats and all that other stuff. However, I think that economically the country is in dire straits. Militarily, Iran controls its press, but there's been a lot of damage inflicted to their military. And it's important to note that we have 3 aircraft carriers now in the Arabian Sea. We haven't had that before. So when combat operations resume, and I expect them to, there will be more firepower directed towards Iran than they've seen. There is a possibility of a military failure, at least in part. But the threshold to disrupt neutral civilian shipping in the international shipping channels, the Strait of Hormuz, it doesn't take a whole lot to do that. You literally just have to have one speedboat that can set out to sea and throw mines overboard. So Iran still has the capability to inflict a lot of damage, particularly given that most of their response has been directed against neutral states, neutral shipping, to include Indian tankers.
Right, Colonel Roshan, also you mentioned the midterms, and of course there's a lot online here for President Trump. And there also have been reports that the U.S. intelligence is actively assessing what happens if Washington actually declares victory and pulls out at this point. How likely do you think that can happen, and how do you reckon Iran is going to respond to that?
I think it's extremely unlikely that that will happen, because it would basically solidify Iran as the owner of the international waterways in the Strait of Hormuz. And those waterways are extremely important to the entire world. I don't think China would accept it, for example. I think it's very unlikely that they would just declare victory and withdraw. I think that what's more likely is that we'll see resume fighting for a period, followed by another ceasefire and negotiations. I think Washington's calculus is that resume fighting will lead to some more Iranian red lines being erased, and then probably another lapse in the ceasefire, more fighting, and it'll work its way up through 3 or 4 iterations before you actually get a durable ceasefire that will be acceptable to the United States and will be bearable by the Iranian regime.
Colonel, earlier you referred to the military power that comes into play in this entire scenario. Iran now says it has new cards to play, even pre-designated targets that it has in its updated database. Could it be serious for Israel and the U.S.?
Well, it'd be more serious for countries such as India that are dependent on Gulf energy. So when Iran says they have new targets, they don't mean air bases. What they mean is, and there was a chart put out on Iranian state TV, and it basically listed energy refinement and storage facilities in the Gulf Cooperation Council states, which have tried to remain neutral in this conflict, which denied the U.S. and Israel access basing and overflights, but were attacked nevertheless. So the Iranian state broadcaster put out things like the natural gas facility at Ras Laffan in Qatar, which is a major natural gas thing, the oil processing facility and refinement facility at Abqaiq, Saudi Arabia, which is the world's largest and produces about 7%, I think, of the world's oil. Things like that. So what they're basically saying is they can cause chaos to the rest of the world, but so far we haven't seen any indication that they're capable of launching, that they're capable of damaging more than 1 or 2 aircraft. They have inflicted significant damage on U.S. bases that are located in the GCC states close to Iran, but those were mostly evacuated prior to the conflict, and they have played no role. I mean, their use was denied for use in the conflict, so that hasn't had a real military impact. Most of their impact has been against neutral states and civilian infrastructure in neutral states.
Noted, Colonel Roshan. While both sides are avoiding a full escalation, neither side is also willing to concede first, at least as this moment, but we'll of course have to wait and see if the situation changes from here on. For now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, Colonel Roche, and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you.